playing games. I'm Susan. Okay, how many of you bought board games or tabletop games on sale with all the Christmas sales that are going on? Raise your hand. Yes. Okay, now, how many of those games, how many of you bought games for yourself when the Christmas sales are going on? Yes, that's a thing. Oh, sorry, dog. Me too. So the playing board games as we get them this year, yeah, we kind of thought we were doing really well with that, but that's just gone right out the window. Hang on a sec. Dog. Dog. Ah, dog. Little gamer dog. Meet Esme. Esme. Meet the world. Look. Yes, good dog. Anyhow, we do have sort of an excuse for having bought so many games while they were on sale. I mean, besides the fact that they were on sale. Well, with Christmas coming up, we're thinking maybe games as presents. Some of these might be presents. They were on our list. We've researched them. We think they'll be really good, a really good fit for us. Perhaps they would be a really good fit for other people we know. So this weekend, we did a little play testing of some of the new games we got. Yes, our little play tester dog. Yes, you're a good dog. Yes, you are. Oh, this video is not going to be like all the others, is it? Yes, one of these videos is not like the others. Anyhow, first, let's look at the one that was a bit of a stinker for us. Cartaventura Lhasa. There are actually multiple games in this series. There's Lhasa, Vinland, Oklahoma, something or other, something. You can look it up. These are sort of choose your own adventure games. They are all dealing with historical exploration and adventure. This one you're following in the footsteps of Alexandra David Neal as she traveled to Lhasa. And you have these little cards and you turn them over and they tell you what to do. Some of them have people on them, tea fields, places like that. Some of them just have like a map. Where's one of the map ones? Of course, I can't find a map one now that I'm looking for it, but sort of like that. And they have narrative on them. Quick flash there, so no spoilers. This didn't work out nearly as well as we thought it would. I wanted to try it out, and I found it on sale, surprisingly. And they're not expensive, even when they are on sale. They're only like about 14, 15 bucks. And you turn over the cards, and you read the narrative, and then you make the choices for what to do, and where to go, and who to talk to, and how to get out of whatever horrible predicament that the cards have put you in now. And this was the thing. My husband and I, at one point, we were just joking about it and just laughing our heads off because it seemed like every card we turned over, there was just like one more horrible thing we had to deal with, you know, and it's just like, it got to the point of being kind of ridiculous. I realized that adventure and working your way through terrible circumstances and making choices in difficult situations is part of the experience, but it just seemed like it was piling on at some point. And also, and this was another thing that we found, inadvertently, you need to get down, inadvertently hilarious. Besides the dog, one of the other things we found inadvertently hilarious was that sometimes the best answer was not actually the right answer. Like if you gave the best answer to, like you're given like these options and you're looking at this and going like, well, obviously we need to do that. But that turns out not to be the right answer. That takes you off on a path where things go from bad to worse, or where you get stuck into a loop. Now, in my opinion, that if you're writing a narrative game, you need to go through it very carefully and very many times so that there's no possible way that a reader can get caught in a perpetual endless loop where you turn over this card and it sends you to that card, which has you turn over that card, which sends you back to this card, which tells you to turn over that card, which you see, perpetual loop. That happened the first time we played this, and we hadn't been that long into the game, but it had us jump like mini cards into the deck, which sort of surprised and alarmed us a bit. But we did what they said and we ended up in a loop. So we just put all the cards back in order and started over again. And this time we got like well deep into the story before we started hitting loops again. And then we would just like back up a few cards and start over again to avoid an endless loop. And I feel like you shouldn't have endless loops in a game like this, especially since there are 5 endings. So, I mean, you know, it's like if you do something wrong, you should hit an ending or something, not just spin. Another problem we hit with the game was that we followed like the narrative stuff, and we got to points in the game where it told us that we needed to now discard or lose X number of things, which at no point in that narrative line had we ever acquired or seen any mention of. So that was another thing that seemed like a design flaw to me. Also, you start off with 2 coins, I believe it is, and you have a little card, and you turn, the card has numbers on it for the number of coins you have, and you turn it like where it's oriented up for the number. It only goes from 0 to 3, and we had 5 coins at one point in time. I'm just looking at them going like, well, just remember how many coins we have now, you know, because the card only goes up to 3, so that seemed like a little bit of a flaw. But I mean, it was an interesting story. It deals with historical events. She was a woman exploring at a time when women were not supposed to go out into the world exploring and, you know, going off on adventures by herself, although she did have companions and guides and various people that she associated with during the course of her adventures, getting from place to place. But And it goes through an area where there were a lot of historical things happening and a certain amount of upheaval and dangerous situations. So historically, it's interesting. I think it could possibly be educational. You can't take it too seriously, although, you know, I mean, I feel like that the designers of this meant for this to be a serious, immersive experience. But there were cards that made us giggle because it just seemed utterly ridiculous. And there were a number of times where clearly the best answer was the wrong answer. What you need to do is you need to figure out not what any sane, rational, normal human being put into those circumstances would do, but what the game designer wants for you to do. And again, that seems like a little bit of a design problem. But since this is just Carta Ventura Lassa, I cannot speak to whether or not that is a problem with other ones. The historical background is interesting on this game. It's kind of short. It's supposed to last an hour, but I can tell you it did not. We just flipped through it and read, and after a while we're just skimming and saying, oh, please, let's just get on to the next disaster and go. So, I mean, we probably didn't give it an entirely fair shake, but we tried to give it an entirely fair shake, but we kept hitting little problems in the game design and then utterly ridiculous kind of answer things that it's like we have to go back and we're going like, well, clearly we needed to do the thing that was very stupid. So we did the stupid thing, and that got us to progress. So, yeah, you got to just kind of take it with a grain of salt. The real hits, though, now we're getting to the real hits. We played not 1, but 2 games from the publisher Pencil First. These had been on my list for a long time, and I don't know, I hadn't gotten around to getting them. There are always shinier games out there, but depending upon, for some definitions of the word shiny. Pencil First has a number of games that are fairly lightweight, small box games, but a lot of fun. One of them is Herbaceous, and another one is Sunset Over Water, and you may notice the size differential here. That's really, the Sunset Over Water comes in a box this size. There are two versions of these two games, and I can't remember if there's any other of their games that come in pocket versions, but there's the regular version, which is this size, and Sunset Over Water comes in a box sort of like this. And then they've come out with pocket editions, which have smaller cards. Now, here's the thing. I can't speak to like any other ones that they put in pocket editions, but I know that for Herbaceous, when they shrunk it down to pocket edition, they removed the names of the herbs from the cards, which mean for legibility issues, which I understand, but I kind of wanted the names on the cards, so I got the standard edition of Herbaceous. Sunset Over Water, though, because you are laying out a 5x5 grid of cards, that gives it a substantial table presence, a good size footprint, I would say, with cards the size of the Herbaceous cards in particular. If I can get the lid off here, and I do want to show you card size because this gets into some really interesting, cool stuff. Okay, yeah. Here is one of the container cards for Herbaceous, so the card would be like that size. So you could see that for Sunset Over Water cards that size, a 5x5 rectangles end-to-end grid would take up a nice chunk of table, which I should also mention at this point, both of these games have art by Beth Sobel. So yeah, beautiful stuff, just beautiful. Let me get into this here. Beth Sobel art. Yes, Beth Sobel art. So you can see here, Sunset Over Water, the cards are considerably smaller. And that works out okay because, like I said, laying it out in a 5x5 grid, it means that you have a smaller footprint, which is, I'm kind of thinking about this game for portability. You have a smaller footprint and it's in a box this size. See? Box this size, little box. It could almost go into your into a back pocket, except it's a little too thick for that. But so I mean, I'm thinking about this for portability. This could be, with cards these size and a box this size, this could be stuck into a suitcase, you know, easy, or a purse or something like that for portability. And you wouldn't need a huge table. You wouldn't have to worry about the cards falling off the edge of the table if you do a 5x5 grid. And you move your little people around on the cards. These are little painter people. Painter meeples. Peoples? No, that would be peoples. But now, Herbaceous, with these big cards. Now, one of the things, here's the one thing I don't like about the standard version of Herbaceous. When I cracked it open, there was cards on both sides. See? 2 card slots. But, you know, you unwrap all of those cards, and really, this box is just almost half the size it needs to be. Because you can put the entire deck over on this side, and then you have like the little area for the markers here. But then I got to looking at that spot there, that empty spot, and that kind of tempted me a bit. So I got to looking at this, and I thought, well, heck, I wonder if I can do Sunset Over Water into here. And you know what? Bingo, I can. I just did it, in fact. And the little meeples, little meeple peoples, the painter meeples go right in there, and voila. You get the pocket edition of Sunset Over Water and the standard edition of Herbaceous, and you can pack them both in one box, which would be, again, pretty handy for traveling if you wanted to just like take a couple of games. So I thought that was kind of nifty when I realized that, because these cards here are exactly half the size of the Herbaceous cards. Rosemary. Okay, and that gets me to, seeing that rosemary card there, the one thing I don't like about Herbaceous, one of the few things I don't like about this, because this weekend, we just played the heck out of this. They don't have any basil. I'm not the only one that complained about this. Dwayne over at Blackboard Gaming also was a bit unhappy. Dwayne Cooks. He's a bit unhappy that they don't have any basil in there. I mean, they've got saffron, for goodness sake. And saffron is another one of those cards that makes me go, huh? Not because it isn't culinary. It's very culinary, but they have cards in here that are called special herbs. But the herbs that are designated as special actually are not special. On the other hand, saffron is expensive, rare, and not used into too many dishes. If ever there was a card that should have gotten the special herb points and planted in the special herb container, it should be saffron. Likewise, lavender. I think I've used lavender in cooking once in my entire life. But perhaps this isn't all meant to be culinary, though with the exception, no, actually with no exceptions, all of these are culinary herbs. We've got rosemary, we've got bay, lavender, tarragon. Chive is one of the special herbs. Chives are special. Yes, special. We've got mint. Mint, which is basically just a domesticated weed, is labeled as a special herb. It will run everywhere. We got sage. Let me see what else I can pull out here if I can do this and thumb through. I guess I shoveled them too well. Thyme is the third of the special herbs. But yeah, and these are the pots that you plant in. The special herbs can only be planted into this one. And if you get one of each, you get, and I have lost it here, the biscuit, an herb biscuit, which is, I shuffled into the deck, I betcha. Just sitting here looking, I betcha I shuffled it into the deck. Okay, never mind. And then you have these. You need to have single cards that are not all like each other. One of different ones that are not like each other, and you score that way. These have to be all the same herb. And, whoa, and I am missing, put it back in here somewhere. Yeah, somewhere in here. Yeah, this one. Pairs. And sometimes you end up having to choose whether or not you want to go with the pairs of cards or singles as you're collecting them. It is a set collection game, but it has a lot of push your luck to it. You have a deck of cards in the center. That's how it starts, a deck of cards in the center. And you have your little marker here. And you lay that marker above, you have your container cards. There are container cards for each player color. And so you lay out your container cards, you put this above it, and then you put the deck of cards in the center, and that is set up. And the deck of cards and the cards that you lay out in the center are the community garden. The cards below the little marker for private garden are at where your container pots are. Those are your private garden. So you do set collection. You turn over a card, and when you turn over a card, you can do one of two things with it. You can put it into your private garden. Nobody can take it if it's in your private garden. In short, you're saving it to pot up. Or you could put it into the community garden. And if you put it into the community garden, then somebody else could take it. But only if they're putting things up. You can only take cards when you're putting things up. Like if your opponent puts something into the community garden, you can't just say, ooh, I want that card, and take it and put it into your private garden. Cards don't go from community garden to private garden, but you can pull from both your private garden and your community garden when you're ready to pot things up, meaning tuck them under one of those container cards. And once you do that, you can't add any more to those containers. So you need to decide like, oh gosh, I've got 5 of these cards. Do I want to wait for 6? But he may scoop all of those cards out of the center. And this is not a 2-player game. We played it a 2-player. It plays very well. There's definitely a tense push your luck element to it, like the give and take about whether or not you want to do those cards now or just kind of keep collecting them. And when I say you draw a card and you decide whether or not to put it into your private garden or the community garden, that's only one of the 2 cards that you draw. The first card, you decide if you want to keep it in your private garden or put it out there in the community garden where you might be able to get it later, but possibly not. The second card you draw has to go in whichever garden you didn't put the first one. So if you draw a card and you say, I think I'll keep that card, and you draw a second card, then when you draw the second card, it does not matter how good it is, it goes into the community garden if the first card went into the private. And vice versa. If you put the first card into the community garden, then that means you're going to be keeping the second card that you draw. And when you're ready to pop stuff up, you gather stuff from the community or your private garden, you tuck it under the container cards, and that container is then done. And you keep going until the deck is done, and then you draw off the rest of the cards, pot up anything else that you possibly can, and then you score. It's a very simple game, but kind of tense and tricky. It's a lot of fun. We are enjoying the heck out of it. And we're really enjoying Sunset Over Water, too. The artwork is breathtaking. I keep thinking, ooh, that's my favorite of all the paintings. That is my favorite. And then I turn over another one and I go, ooh, that is my favorite. The cards all have, for Sunset Over Water, the cards all have little symbols up here. And you have commissions. You are a painter, and these are commissions you're trying to fulfill. To fulfill a commission, you would need to have 2 paintings in this one. One painting that has one symbol like that, and one painting which can have 2 of any symbol. This one has, let me see here, I'll find one. This one you would need 3 paintings, all of which has a sunset and anything else. And there are some that are even trickier than that. Let me see, I've got them all in here. Oh yeah, and here's our time cards. Everybody has a hand of these, and you shuffle them up and you draw 3 and pick one. The number at the top is what time in the morning you get up to go out and paint, and that determines who goes first in that round. The second section determines which direction on that 5x5 grid that you can move from your starting position at the end of the last turn. You start dead center at the very beginning of the game, but then you move around. So some of these directions you might not even be able to do. And, you know, they have different directions. Some of them you can go any direction, including diagonally. The last number on here at the very bottom is how many paintings you are allowed to pick up off of that grid. And you can pick up the painting that you're on as long as no other painter is on it, like at the very beginning of the round, because you normally cannot occupy the same space as another painter. So it's just really a lot of fun. You also can't go over holes that are left when you pick up paintings to add to your little collection. Unlike Herbaceous, you can just keep collecting paintings, you know. I mean, Herbaceous, you can't just like drop a bunch of stuff off the community garden and then keep it in your private stash until you're ready to pot. It's just got to stay out there in the middle where anybody can get it. But if anything along the path that you move on Sunset Over Water, including the card that you're on, you can pick up according to the number on here as to what, none of those are the right card, until according to the number there that says how many paintings you can, I say, paint at, for that round. And then you put the cards that you don't use, because you're choosing one of those time cards out of 3, and you put the 2 you don't use on the bottom. And then for the next round, you draw 3 cards off the top, which have different constraints for that round. And you keep doing that until you no longer have 3 cards left. But it's a fun little game, and you're just doing this thing with the grids, and it leaves holes, which you can't go over holes, as I understand it. And that wasn't a problem with two-player. I actually think that the game would be harder and trickier if you played it with more players, because you would then have to possibly go, or you would be blocked basically from getting to certain cards because you can't jump over those holes in the board. Okay, let's move this out of the way now and get to the last game that we played this weekend, and that is Codenames Duet. This may look kind of familiar to some of you because Codenames is a very popular party game, but this is a two-player or potentially two-team version of it. And it's a cooperative game, not competitive. You are trying to find the words, reveal the spies, give the proper code names for the spies without pointing to an assassin. Yes, if you meet up with an assassin, it's game over. Play the Game channel has a team playthrough of this, which I will link below. If I remember it, I should remember it. And here are your spies. The spies are falling everywhere. No, can't see her very well. Yeah, oh wow, he's got rocking kind of a James Bond kind of tux there. So, these are your spies. These are the good guys. Huh, he's got kind of a Jason Statham look to him. Anyhow, time tokens. These are little things that you lay down if you accidentally finger an innocent bystander, gets caught up in the crossfire, you know, or you just turn them over to the check mark side to mark a round that's over. The real meat of the game are the word cards. And they give you a lot of word cards. I mean, the amount of replayability in this, and I think this may be another 5x5 grid. It's a big grid. I would have to double check that off the top of my head, how many the grid, this is stuck somehow, what the grid is. Here are the cards. You can see that the words are both, so you're sitting opposite the person you're playing against, and so you both need to be able to see the words, and the words are laid out in a grid. Ah, this tells me what the grid is. These are your key cards, and they also give you a whole lot of key cards. First of all, let's look at how very, very many of these cards there are that you can lay out in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, 5x5 grid. This many cards. Okay, now double that number because there's a different word on the back. So, yeah, you could play this a long time and not come up with the same combinations or even the same words. These are your key cards. They're put into a little plastic doohickey. One side faces you, the other side faces your partner across the table. The sides are not identical. The black squares are assassins. The tan squares are innocent bystanders. The green squares are your spies. And they're the ones you need to be giving the proper code names to. So you lay out this thing, and you need to look at your side of the grid. You can't see your opponent's side of the grid. Look at the words that are in that position on the grid. And then say a word and a number. And the word must be a clue that is related to the word or words that you want the person across the table from you to point to. Like, for instance, here's a couple. Okay, you have Frost and Santa. So you might say something like winter or Christmas, 2. Now, Frost and Santa ideally would be in a position on here, on the grid, on the table, where there are 2 green squares. You don't want to give them a code word that might make them accidentally point to one of the black squares where the assassins lie. So you might say Christmas too, and the person across the table looks at all the words, and let's say these are the only two words that could potentially be related to Christmas. And sometimes there'll be a bit of a stretch, so they will point to one, and if they are right, you will put a spy on that square. If they are wrong, turn ends. If they guess right, though, for the first one, then they get to point again to go for the second word of the Christmas too. And if they are right, here. If they point to an innocent bystander, you put one of those innocent bystander tags on there, and the turn ends, and it goes to the next person to give a clue. Now, the tricky part of this is that the sides are not the same on the key card. So you're trying to make sure that the person opposite you does not point to a card that's in the position of the assassin on your side of the board. Now, let's say that Frost here was, see, on this side, my opponent's side of the board. This one down here is black. On my side of the board, that's tan. So if I said Christmas and he points to Santa and Frost, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, and Frost was in that bottom position over here, for him, that's an assassin position, but he should definitely go ahead and point to it because it's not an assassin position on my side. And that's what counts. What counts is I need to give words that will hit green squares, preferably only green squares on my side. And he must do the same for his side. And ideally, you are trying to get 15 words right. And you got 9 tries, I think it is. And the reason why you're going like, well, there's no way that's going to add up to 15, and you're right. There is 3 green squares that overlap. Most of the time, green and tan and black are not going to be in the same position on both sides of the card, but there will be 3 green that overlap, meaning that that square will be a spy for both you and your opponent. So it is just a really fun game. We had a lot of fun with it. It's more word association than anything else. I mean, you can, to some extent, knowing the person that you're partnered with for this, that you're playing against, or playing with, I should say, because it's a co-op game, you are both trying to find the green square spies and trying to avoid pointing to what would be an assassin for your opponent. But knowing your opponent could really help on this game because, I mean, it's word association, things that are related to, and it may be very loosely related to that word. Excuse me. You're trying to get them to say that word and some other word, but not point to any of these other ones. You're just trying to get those specific ones. So, I mean, if you know your opponent, I mean, if boat and werewolf were up there, and if you're really good, you can get like 3 or 4. Of course, it depends upon the cards that are turned up. I mean, werewolf. We got werewolf. We did not get boat. I think boat may be in here. But let's say that werewolf and boat were part of the grid that was laid out and they were both on green squares. I mean, well, actually, what if it was werewolf that was laid out and I gave the clue boat? Now, say werewolf and ocean were laid out in the grid and they were both on green squares and I gave the clue boat. Now, my husband would immediately point to ocean because ocean would be associated with boats. Now, somebody else might not point to werewolf, but assuming there's nothing else that would be associated with boats on the board, my darling husband might point to werewolf. I might be able to get werewolf from him because, you know, Kolchak, Night Stalker. Not that long ago, we saw again the episode where it was a werewolf on a boat. Cruise ship, actually. But still, you see what I mean? If you know your partner really well, you can sometimes make sketchy, close, difficult associations that other people might not make or get. So there is a certain extent, you know, in chess, there's a saying about, you know, whether or not you play the board or play the opponent, because there's an idea that, you know, as it's an abstract strategy game and you're looking at and you're analyzing the situation on the board as coldly and as rationally as you possibly can. But if you know your opponent, then you may know that your opponent has certain tendencies, that they have a tendency to protect certain pieces even when they don't need to, or they have a tendency to want to sack something when they really shouldn't, or that they are always going to move to that square if they've got an opportunity to do so in the middle game. So you might make a move based upon not just what would be the best move on the board, but playing your opponent, making a move that takes into account what your opponent is likely to do that might not actually be, strictly speaking, you know, what would be the most rationally best decision on the board, because everybody has their own playing style to some extent. And the same thing is true with code names. If you know your partner really well, you can ping pong these word association things. You can look at a grid of words and you can say, that is connected to that, is connected to that, is connected to that, and then is connected to that. And they are all connected to this word, which if I give him that word, he will know which ones on here I mean. So it's, I don't know, it's a nifty little deduction game. It really is. And we just had so much fun playing it. Although there's also like a certain amount of just pure hilarity involved because, you know, you're looking at this in the post game when you're looking over the game and everything and you're going like, really? You were trying to get me to say that? You associated that with that? I'm like, what were you thinking kind of thing? And it just, you can come up with really hilarious sort of associations like werewolf and boat. But we had a huge amount of fun this weekend. We are casual board gamers. We mostly play on weekends. And this weekend, we looked at a lot of little small box games that might fit into a stocking, well, these two perhaps, or under the tree for people for Christmas. Maybe not so much this one, but I don't know. Choose your own adventure. Why not? But this is what we looked at. We had a lot of fun playing these, and we just played them over and over and over again because they're the kind of games that you can just play over and over and over again. So yeah, these three games just consumed our weekend in the most pleasant way possible. I mean, we did other things. It's the weekend. We did other things, and that's another thing. These games are short. They're fast. So, I mean, it's not like you're just going to spread it all out over the table and leave it up all weekend because you're going to be playing all weekend long or anything like that. You can just they're like, I don't know, 20-minute games. I think they said 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Maybe a little longer. Codenames, it says 15. But that's if you just don't think about it and overanalyze it the way that we did on some of the rounds. Oh my goodness, we had so much fun, and I hope that you will have some fun with these games too. It's been good talking to you about board games again, and I hope that you're having a nice December and that you're playing some games in the midst of all the holiday preparations, and that you'll think about some of these as possibly gifts for friends because they're a lot of fun. They're entry level. Codenames Duet is 2-player. If you're looking for something with a larger group of people over the holidays, consider the original version of Codenames, which is just Codenames. It's a party game. But it's been good talking to you. I will link some things that I mentioned in the video in the description below as usual. Like, subscribe, comment, click the little bell to get notifications, etc., etc., etc. Have a happy and festive holiday season, and I'm going to make another video probably between now and Christmas anyway to